This is a two-part presentation. We'll be covering a few things, but I promise you I've kept it very short in the interest of time and the curfew and whatnot. And I want to obviously leave time for questions. But joining me tonight is my colleague, Brian Jones. He is in charge of the wealth department. He's the managing director of that. I am a Bitcoin generalist, if you can coin that term, and he is more of a Bitcoin specialist. So I figured we would bring all of the in-house experts to talk about the relevant topics. And again, we're very thankful for this opportunity to kind of share this information. I've made this presentation very short in the interest of time and understanding, but I've made it very, very, very rich with information. So with that said, let me do the second step, which is share my screen. Okay, well, before I do that, let me put this up here. Thank you for that. Enter full screen, perfect. I will share my screen. And okay, can everyone see that beautiful lady standing there? Let's see. And yes, I can, if you wave your hands, I can see that as well. Yes. All right, see the hands waving. Thank you for bearing with me as I get this going. All right, perfect. So everyone can see that beautiful lady again. One more wave of hands, just making sure. Yes, thank you so much. All right, so I felt it's important to kind of, when you speak about finances, it's a very timely conversation, right? And so I figured I would craft this presentation around financial options for the future, and I've kind of saved it as forging a financial future. And I think it's very important, but before we get into the how, and more important, the why is very important. And I figure it would be good to kind of reference a great starting point for all given the audience. And with that said, let me minimize the screen. Proverbs 13:11 says, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers it little by little will increase it. And I think the key thing that we have to kind of start with is that building wealth is a slow and steady game, more or less. If we are fortunate enough to have a windfall or some type of financial blessing, then that can change our picture. But for most part, a lot of people are busy in life living. And so the key to really tackling it is knowing that, it won't be gained hastily. And, it must be, gathered little by little and make use of what that is done with that wealth. So, when it comes to investing is when savers use financial tools. So every great investor really starts as a great saver. And so that's probably the one thing I want to kind of impart. You want to start this program by just becoming a steady saver and becoming financially stable by managing your finances. I like to demystify a lot of the things. And usually when you see a good investor, that's just a byproduct of someone who is a good saver and deploy their money. Now, investment houses like Leno package investment products as tools for you to build wealth. So traditional financial instruments in the Bahamas tend to be government bonds, or what we know as BGRS, or as they call Bahamas Government Registered Stock. Those would have been these would have been different terms and names we would have heard over time. For example, the bridge bond was a government bond back in the day that was used to help build the second bridge to PI. And the government continues to issue a lot of government bonds, which is a fancy way of saying debt or loans where the government is borrowing money from the people through the markets. And they've been very visual and proactive with trying to engage the public. So you might be seeing them post stuff in the newspaper, and that's what that really is. The other, traditional investment is stocks. People are kind of familiar with this. There's been some glory stories of the cable Bahamas, and then there's been some not so glorious stories like the R&Ds where things would kind of dwindle and stocks represent its own risk and they're considered risky by normal, and government bonds are considered very, very safe. And then mutual funds tend to be the user-friendly pre-packaging of how most investors could invest in some combination of government bonds and stocks. Now, again, investors are savers that use the best investment tools for their target area savings. So when it comes to retirement savings, they either have a pension plan and or an individual retirement account. And all an individual retirement account is a structured savings plan where people pretty much put money away on a regular basis, say monthly, and that money is now invested using a strategy that fits and falls into their comfort level. I have some more information on that, but I just want to frame the overall conversation. And the good thing about, retirement savings, the reason I started with that is, in the Bahamas, I always say we are very busy living. A lot of people, in our climate, we're just trying to get day to day, and we tend not to think about tomorrow. And if we really describe ourselves as a society, if I asked if we were spenders or savers, most of us would probably say spenders. And then if I asked, do we live for today or tomorrow? Most of us would say today. And the reason I'm starting with retirement savings, because again, this notion of savings, but saving for retirement, which is tomorrow, is really the end all of all financial plans. And again, as a society, we don't talk about it. And culturally, we don't talk about it. But it's an important area of savings and investing. Hi, is that questions or? Sorry. Okay, so I heard some stuff. Now we get into long-term savings. And long-term savings is where you would use something like brokerage accounts, which are different types of accounts that manage government bonds and stocks and use a platform to kind of make sure they're using. And again, the more popular user-friendly one are mutual funds where you don't actually have to do the picking and purchasing of any particular stock or government bond. The fund does that. You just invest in the fund, generate a return, and when you're ready, you just take your money and apply it to other areas of your life. And then there's investment savings. In the Bahamas, we have to be very mindful of how we use the term investment. We come from a society where we know about cash businesses and we know about business, and some of us are comfortable with that. So I always treat investment savings different than financial savings. And again, that's for business or high risk investments or anything that you feel comfortable taking some little bit of risk with. But again, I'm here to speak more about financial information and financial thoughts. And again, Leno knows information leads to informed decision making. So again, just as a quick snapshot as the industry overview and understanding the options that are available. And some of these names are stuff I would have introduced earlier. I'm just putting the more formal name on it. So when we say stocks, the fancy name for that is really equities. And equities is when you have a particular ownership in a particular company. Now the risk level is high because as an owner, the way you can get rid of that is if you sell it, right? And some of the pros of buying stocks are, again, Cable Bahamas, you can benefit from price appreciation where you buy it at a low price and the price goes up. And then dividend income where, again, when you are a shareholder, you're entitled to profit sharing. And those are called dividends. And usually what happens is every couple of months or once a year, or again, the company's motivation to pay dividends is to keep its shareholders happy. They would pay a little portion of income as a dividend thing. Now, cons are you are a residual owner and it's very volatile. So what do I mean by that? When you own a share, you own it. And the only way you can get rid of something is if you have to sell it. If nobody wants to buy your share, then you run the risk of being stuck with it, which has happened in the past. And that's something you have to be very mindful of. And the returns may be lower compared to other options, because at the end of the day, a lot of times the share price is really based on the company's performance and how that company performs and does well, and the overall value of that company going up. And in the Bahamas, where we have a certain critical mass, every company will plateau at some point and then probably get more into paying dividends, such as like a Commonwealth Bank. Now, the regulators for that is something called the Securities Commission of the Bahamas, and then BISX, which isn't really a regulator, but they are a regulator in the sense that they monitor the exchange that all the stocks are traded on. So they ensure the integrity of it. And the Securities Commission, on the other hand, ensures the integrity of the overall market. Next, we have fixed income. And fixed income is, again, the fancy name for government bonds. The risk level with that is very low. The reason I call that a loan-like investment is because, by definition, it's a contractual payment of interest and principal. And if any of us were to borrow the money from a bank, we would be obliged into a contractual payment of interest and principal. So it's very important to understand, in this instance, the government is the borrower, the investors, i.e. are the lenders, and they are raising the money in the market. And it's a relatively safe investment, contrary to popular belief, regardless of any political party affiliation. The Bahamas is a very strong economy, and our government bonds are very, very, very great, very good, actually. They bring a lot of attractive returns to the market. The cons are they're usually long-term investment, but we're seeing the central bank change its position on that. Usually they used to go 15, 20, 30 years. Now you can get the same 15, 20, 30 years, but you can also now get a bond for 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. And again, this is the central bank kind of moving more towards the investment market and trying to take in a retail element where they make their bonds more available and aware to the market, as well raising the profile of investment brokers like ourselves to help people take care of that. And there's another type of bond as well, because I mentioned government, but government aren't the only issuers of bonds. The other issue of bonds are corporations. So banks or financial institutions can offer a bond as well. And that brings in a different risk because, again, at that point, you'll be betting the financial strength of that institution. Now, mutual funds. Mutual funds, again, they offer an interesting, different nations of equities and fixed income. So you may have a mutual fund that is very large percentage of equities, so naturally the risk level is high. You may have a mutual fund that has a large percentage of fixed income, so the risk level is very low. But what they do offer is diversification. So you're not just invested in one particular bond, but you're invested in a portfolio of bonds or portfolio of stocks. They have professional management, so you have the best of the best in our house looking at that, buying and selling all the bonds or stocks that we feel best suit its goal. And then liquidity and low cost, meaning to actually get out of a mutual fund, there are no exit fees. Whereas if you own a stock or a bond, you would have to sell that. There's a handling fee. With a stock, there's a listing fee on BISX. So again, I'm a big fan of understanding, what is the cost to do business and what other returns are there. And then the cons are, there are no guarantee of returns by professional. We have to put that disclaimer, but with certain mutual funds, you can design them to be safe and steady. And then by definition, we always like to say not risk-free. And then our regulators would be, again, the Securities Commission of the Bahamas. And then BISX is more or less a listing agency where we report information. Now, important questions to ask. This is very important when you go into any, in the Bahamas, everyone has an investment idea. Everyone, I've always found it very interesting where, sometimes we may know a portion of some information, but we'll communicate like we know the entire story. And that applies to investments as well. So I always encourage people to ask certain important questions. So from investment returns, what type of interest does the investment earn? Simple or compound? And I put an illustration on the left-hand side of the graph here to show the difference. This is simple interest. Simple interest is like a fixed deposit. You know what you're going to get every month. And that's when the interest is the same and it's calculated time and time again, and it grows very linearly. Compound interest is when interest earns interest on itself, and you now get that snowball effect. And that is, important to understand, because understanding the difference is the key to getting the extra money to grow. Investment costs, are there any entrance fee or front end fees? Are there any exit fees? Because again, all of these are important. So when you speak to someone about returns, you want to figure out what type of return am I getting? Compound is a lot times better than simple. And then you want to know, what about dividends? Are they reinvested? Or are they paid out? And then you want to get into the investment costs to do business. And a quick example of simple interest versus compound is if we had an investment that earned 10%, 10% a month, under simple interest, the first month, 10% on $100 is $10. Second month, 10% on $100 is $10. So you would now have a balance of $120. With compound interest, you earn interest on your interest or full value. So with that said, the same investment earning 10% on $100 every month. Well, the first month you earn 10% on $100 and you earn $110. But in the second month, you earn 10% on the $110. And that now gives you $11 interest. And it's that subtle difference which allows this small curve to now get into this beautiful slope. Now, the interesting thing about this is the best thing you can actually use for an investment is time, because time allows compounding. Time allows your investment to keep earning in itself. And that's very important to understand. All right, so here is an overview of some of our mutual funds that Leno offers. Again, I'm presenting this because this is a very user-friendly tool. And the good thing about this is that our mutual funds are our investment strategies within our college savings and retirement plans. And again, I always think a retirement plan is good. I always think a tool for long-term savings is good. And I like people to know that these options are out there and they could understand how to maximize them. So again, here we have the conservative strategy. The conservative strategy is the risk level is very low. It's made up of government bonds, which are steady earners. And as you can see, there's a consistent return of 4%. And in 2019 and 2020, we get 3 to 1%. The only thing that can drag this return down is a buildup of cash, meaning I've been doing my job too good and we need to deploy the cash into investments. But by design, since inception, you can see it's been doing 4.2. Now, the balance strategy is something with someone who has a little bit, want to take a little bit of risk and they're comfortable with taking some calculated risk. And again, the thought process is that you will have ups, you will have downs, but if any fluctuations on the stock market will be buffered by the steadiness of fixed incomes that are in the portfolio. And as you can see, you can get an idea of the range of returns that it can do. 7.96 when things are really doing good in the market. It can get to 4.8, 3.4, 3.8, 4.5, and then this year evens out again 0.3. We've kind of seen COVID challenge the economy in ways and really challenge the global economy in ways that we didn't anticipate. And then we have the aggressive strategy, which again, this is for those who have a very long-term investment horizon or have a particular comfort level. But the thought process is that there will be peaks and valleys. However, the overall return in the end game will be higher than it is. And that's kind of what you're seeing with the return since inception. But of all of them, you can see it's the most volatile. When it's doing good, it's up as high as 8%. When things are not doing well, it can go low down to -10. But this is the kind of thing that you have to be mindful of. Now, the good thing about investments is that if you want the safe and steady return, that exists right here. And a lot of people think that dollars can get any mutual fund. And the other element is that these investment strategies are actually the same strategies that are available in a retirement plan that you can start with $50. And again, some brokerage accounts. And I think it's important to understand the traditional investments that you have today to understand all the options that you have going into the future. Because a lot of times through degrees of separation, people don't realize that they have the ability to invest in a government bond, or they have the ability to invest in a user-friendly investment so they can get out when they need to. And these different things offer the levels of performance and participation that people might be interested in. Now, the history of money. It's important to talk about the history of money because everything we spoke about was how money is now used as an investment. You would take cash and you would buy stocks. You would take cash and you would buy government bonds. And again, to have cash, you would have to save it, right? So I want to give you the brief little history of money to kind of give you an idea where we started, where we are, and where we're headed. So first and foremost, back in the day, they said you would barter for something. So I would trade my fruit for some chickens or some fruit for some vegetables. That eventually led to bartering for gold. Gold became the norm to kind of standardize transaction. Gold became coins because who carrying a big brick of gold is not very practical, so they standardized it and they got gold coins. Then gold coins became paper money, where the paper money would pretty much say, hey, this paper money represents the gold coins that we have in the bank and is just as good as the gold coins. Then we saw a very interesting evolution. We saw paper money become paperless. And that's when money became via credit cards. And that's, digital representation of money, where now it ain't about not only having the cash in your wallet, but now this notion of having this cash in your bank account and this being digitally represented. And then now having this cash or having some cash of value on your credit card or debit card. And so now we've now moved into digital money, which is again your bank account. But what we're now seeing is a move to digital currency. And this has been a very interesting buzzword because the word digital evokes a lot of things and the word currency evokes a lot of things. And I think it's important to understand where we are and what we're doing. Now, what is sand dollar and how is sand dollar different from cryptocurrency? I think it's important to know because, the Bahamas, for a very small island, we are gold medalists in the Olympics. And our accomplishments with sand dollar is nothing short of a gold medal in the financial world from the perspective of what it represents and how it's going to be used to try transform the Bahamas. Now, what is sand dollar? It is a CBDC. It is a central bank digital currency. So sand dollar is central bank digital currency, and digital currency is legal tender. So that same dollar bill you have in your wallet, sand dollar is the digital representation of currency. That dollar was minted and entered circulation through the economy. What central bank does now is digitally mint and distribute the ecosystem. And so it's important to understand it is not a cryptocurrency. So it does not behave like a commodity. A lot of cryptocurrencies have been demonstrating their value in terms of what they can do as a proof of concept, as a means of holding value, as a means of having interactions with peers. So it's an empowerment platform. And as a result, it has a commodity effect. People can buy it and it goes up in value. Sand dollar is not that. It is literally just the digital dollar to the $1 bill that's in your pocket. Now, it's the cashless option that will empower the microeconomies like the Family Islands that feed into the bigger economy. And this is a part of a bigger goal. The government has a goal to reduce cash handling by 50% in 5 years. And this is very important because right now we're seeing a shift in our landscape, right? We're seeing banks retract from the Family Islands because, I mean, if we were to be quite honest, Family Islanders aren't the ideal clients for banks. And they are trying to struggle with that. Family Islanders save money. they live within their generational lands. If they get land, they will either get it through generational property or purchase it. They are very comfortable building out of pocket and usually don't take on a lot of mortgages and tend to save a lot of money. So what's happening now is, again, as banks are pulling out and tourists are coming in with cash, sand dollar is going to be the solution that puts the power of banking, or the ability to move your personal banking into your hand. So now instead of getting paid cash, you will get this digital cash that you can now digitally send through an approved PSP. And you must use a licensed payment service provider like Canoe, which is regulated by the Central Bank of the Bahamas, because again, the central bank is the money supply. They are printing CBDC, or central bank digital currency. And as a result, they have other layers of players involved to ensure that people can now transact sand dollar. And be on standby, because I've been lucky enough to be involved in some of the sand dollar stakeholder meetings, and they're intending to do a public education campaign starting April 1st. Again, don't hold me to that. That's what they told me from the central bank. But I think what's going to happen is people are going to understand what sand dollar is. And the reason this becomes extremely powerful is, again, if the government is able to get a lot of people using sand dollar, and especially have tourists buying sand dollar and spending in sand dollar, then all of the headaches associated with handling cash will go away, and Bahamians will have the option to have a digital currency that they can distribute, put in their bank account, do as they please without the trappings of cash. So it's a very ambitious picture, but it's a solution that they want to have that carries over into the different economies, and it benefits our overall picture. Now, what is Bitcoin? Again, is it the future of money, or is it the future? You know, Bitcoin started off as a cryptocurrency, and it's been, implementation is kind of putting the power into the market's hand, where a lot of transactions are now peer-to-peer, and they have its own private trail, its own private digital ledger, and everyone is respective owners of their information, but there's a shared collective responsibility related to it. And this is just a quick general. I'm so happy to have Brian, who's our specialist, who will be coming on shortly. But this is just an idea of where Bitcoin started, and then where it's kind of headed. You know, Bitcoin is a decentralized digital currency without a bank or Bitcoin, without the need for intermediaries. Transactions are verified by network nodes through cryptography and recorded in a public distributed ledger called blockchain. And Bitcoins are created as a reward for process known as mining. And they can be exchanged for other currencies, products, and services. Now, it's been criticized for its illegal use in transactions because, again, the power has been shifted in the peer-to-peer market. But what we've been seeing is that Bitcoin, it's always been used as an investment, although, several regulatory agencies have issued investor alerts about Bitcoin, because what's being shown is that Bitcoin is very powerful. It's shown to have tremendous value. And one of the value points of Bitcoin is that it allows the market to transact within itself, amongst itself, without having to run through any central agency like banks and whatnot. And again, there's tremendous elements to consider. And just so you know, I just throw in this little note, research produced by the University of Cambridge estimated that at 2017, there are 2.9, 5.8 million unique users. So you have a lot of people using Bitcoin, and that was 3-4 years ago, So understanding where this thing kind of came from and how it's moving into the light and getting all of the buzz, because it's behaving like a commodity. And just again, to kind of go back, it's not sand dollar, right? Sand dollar is, It's not sand dollar because sand dollar is not a cryptocurrency. So it does not behave like a commodity. Bitcoin has shown value in itself, so it's behaving like a commodity. And understanding that is very, very, very important. And with that said, I like to talk about Bitcoin in the Bahamas, and I like to introduce our in-house resident expert on Bitcoin. He's definitely one of the biggest contributors to cryptocurrency, the conversation of currency of Bitcoin in the Bahamas. So I will turn it over to my good friend Brian, and let Brian chime in. And again, we'll open it up for questions. I do have to apologize in the sense that a 7:30 meeting in relation to Sand Dollar came up, oddly enough. But I'm here and Brian is here to kind of speak on it. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Brian. Are you there with me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Wonderful, sir.
Great. Good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with you. And considering that we're short on time, I'll only highlight a few key features of Bitcoin that I think that I'd like just to reemphasize some of the points that Khalil made so we can understand how it fits into our lives here in the Bahamas and how it's relevant to us, um, in a very real way. Right? He gave you the history of money, and basically, it started out in a very different format. But here we are today, where we have digital money. Now, Bitcoin really is what started this whole movement of digital money. Okay, and the reason why Bitcoin was successful in achieving this the right mix of technology, right, to be considered programmable money. Um, is that it was based on a technology called blockchain. Okay, now you might have heard a lot about blockchain as a buzzword. This technology is something that has basically impacted today. It's now impacting almost every industry. It started out with Bitcoin, and it started out as a financial application, but it is now being utilized across the board, and even to the point where central banks have picked up variations of this technology to create things like the sand dollar, central bank digital currencies. Right now, why do I reference that? It's because this digital money, it's people try to figure out, well, why does it have value, right? Where does the value come from? Okay, if it's not backed by anything, right? We know that regular money is issued by governments and is backed by the governments, right? It's backed by their ability to generate tax and so on and so forth, right? And the ability of the government to settle its debts. Okay, but Bitcoin is not backed by anything. So where does this value come from? It comes from the fact that Bitcoin is the first scarce digital asset. Okay, what do I mean by that? Just think about this. There's a general or inherent problem with digital information. Okay, it can be copied, right? So just think about, you send a photo to someone, and by email. When you send it to them, you still have it on your computer, right? But they also have a copy. See, with money that wouldn't work, because if you could just copy the money, then it would just be worthless. So Bitcoin managed to solve that, and that's why this has proliferated so much. There's a limited amount of Bitcoin. There's only 17 million of them roughly in circulation. There will only ever be 21 million of them. You see, so this is why it is increasing in value. So the more people utilize it, this decentralized network that Khalil described to you, that is coordinated by this scarce token, it's called Bitcoin, it will continue to appreciate in value as the demand for this service grows. And its function is very simple. It provides a simple service, and it is to allow people to exchange value amongst themselves, peer to peer, without going through a financial intermediary. So here in the Bahamas, um, we have been looking to embrace this technology. As you can see from the central bank, they started with the central bank digital currency, but the Securities Commission now, as of December, has published a new set of legislation. It's called the Digital Asset and Registered Exchanges Act, and this allows Bahamian businesses to actually engage in the digital asset business in terms of buying and selling Bitcoin in exchanges. You can actually create other tokens that are similar to Bitcoin to fund projects, to provide utility. to different platforms. So, for example, that they can be used to represent rights and value, and not only ownership, as you might be accustomed to with stocks and bonds, right? So it's a very interesting way to create incentives for investors to add capital to projects, and it's very exciting that now the Bahamas is considered a leader in this space globally. And what we expect that, from a local perspective, is that this should increase the amount the amount of activity in our capital markets. When fintech or financial technology and digital assets are combined, what happens is that transactions become cheaper, more secure, and much faster. Okay, so that really should improve the way that the economy is functioning, really from a capital flow standpoint. And that's one of the biggest issues in the Bahamian economy at the moment. It's very difficult to unlock capital for investment purposes. So this is, again, one of the main reasons why we're very excited about this. And Bitcoin in general, the amount of value that's been injected into Bitcoin is over $1 trillion today. And this really represents one of the greatest transfers of wealth in the history of mankind. Okay, because the big banks and big Wall Street firms and institutions are just starting to get in now, 10, 12 years later, right? But it was a bottom up grassroots movement from the retail investors and everyday investors, and even just nerds, right? People who were just into technology, and they discovered that this thing had some value, and they started to contribute to the network, right? See, Bitcoin is an open source technology where it's really developed by a community of people, and there's no one person who's responsible for it, so it can't be shut down. See, if Bitcoin could have been shut down by world governments by now, it would have been. The mere fact that it's still here today means that it's going to be around tomorrow, and at least for another decade, right? It's been around for a decade, so it'll be around for at least another decade. And those are some simple economics laws of economics that dictate these things. So this is the reason why Bitcoin is actually on the headlines almost every day these days. It's at its historic highs, and what it does, it just shows the potential of digital assets. It shows the potential of what can happen when financial markets begin to operate more efficiently and transparently, right? Because every single transaction that happens in the Bitcoin network is recorded on the blockchain. Everyone can see it, right? Everyone, so nobody knows who's doing which transaction unless you can identify someone's wallet address. But the point is, if someone says a transaction was done, you don't have to go and ask them to give you proof. You can go and check it yourself. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin. It functions the way I think financial markets were designed to function. And it serves as an example for what other platforms can do. So following Bitcoin, you now have over I think almost 10,000 different tokens now that are saying that they're the next biggest, better Bitcoin in one way, shape, or form, or just doing something different with the technology. But the fact remains is that it started a huge wave of development and innovation and the likes it was never seen before in technology, period. And as a matter of fact, the greatest minds in technology historically are dedicating the remainder of their lives and their careers to blockchain technology, which is something that just basically sends signals to the world that again, this is here to stay. So this is why we thought it was important to share this information with you this evening, and wanted to at least leave 5 minutes for questions because I know we have to wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. And again, like and I think what we kind of touched upon today is this iceberg effect, that we see this concept sticking above the water, but underneath this concept is so much more other supporting stuff going on, and it's all kind of influencing the Bahamas is leading its own way in doing that. And so with that said, I'd like to thank you all. You guys have my definite this sand dollar thing popped up after hours last minute as an emergency thing, but I will definitely entertain time for questions, comments, thoughts. Was the presentation useful Did it give you an overview of the financial sphere? Do you understand sand dollar a bit better? Do you understand the difference between sand dollar and cryptocurrency? And again, do you have any questions on any of the topics? We'll be happy to answer.
Good evening, Mr. Brathwaite. You can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, so I have two questions. The first question is, what's the difference between canoe and sand dollar? And the second question is, I know the government jumped into sand dollar and was one of the first to do it, I guess, amongst all the countries in the world. But was it the answer to having a island luck account per se?
So great questions, right? And it's a great question because it really deals with the reality of the Bahamas. So let's think about it and let's take it in layers. So sand dollar is digital money, digital currency, and that money supply is issued, printed, and developed by the central bank of the Bahamas. Now, when that goes into the money supply, the central bank is only interested in ensuring its integrity. But Canoe and other payment service providers are designated central bank regulated payment service providers that money supply goes through now. So imagine if each dollar is a car and these payment providers are the different roads and infrastructure that allows this movement of money. Because again, it's one thing to have your digital currency in your wallet, but you want to have to be able to spend it as a merchant, spend it with a merchant, or spend it or send it amongst your friends, family, or colleagues, and in that regard. And that would be the difference. One is a payment service provider and facilitates the movement of sand dollar, and one is the actual issuer of digital currency, which is the central bank. And again, and what is the difference between that and island luck? So it's a great question. You know, we like to think we've seen digital money for the first time, but we've been seeing evolvements of it because all of us have dabbled with digital money. If we've ever bought prepaid minutes for a phone, you would have bought a dollar value based commodity that translates into that has value, because remember now you could send people minutes, right? And so it just existed in one platform. What sand dollar is promoting is the ability to have that coexist openly in the economy using payment infrastructures that are regulated by them. And then the big difference is with Island Luck, that's really a gaming network. And what happens again, just like mobile minutes, it allows digital representation of money. So people are able to use the network of money, say it's with Island Luck. So they'll load up their one account and send their friend some money on Island Luck. And then that person would go into Island Luck and get it out. The way Canoe and Sand Dollar are the game changers is that with a Sand Dollar and with a Canoe wallet, you can send them money direct. So I know of instances in Freeport where funds were sent from a person in Nassau to a family member in Freeport. And those funds via Canoe, digital cash, and Sand Dollar, and those funds were spent in a grocery store with a balance of the funds being taken out for pocket change. Now, between me and you, the central bank doesn't want that. They want people to keep the Sand Dollar in because there's tremendous value in it, but that would be the key difference. And again, we're seeing different elements of digital representation, but what this brings about is a more direct, integrated way with a lot more integrity. So I hope that answered your question, sir. Yes, sir. I see you at the mic.
Yes, Mr. Brathwaite, two questions.
Sure.
Can sand dollar achieve the objective of accruing interest? And second, the conventional form of investments, when would you suppose an individual should start disseminating or downsizing based upon their age and the type of investments that they may have in order that they may be more capable of giving those types of investments to family, friends, or whomever they may care? And do you suggest someone over the age of 60 to be investing in the stock market, say 20% of their earnings?
So all great questions, right? And they're very profound questions from a lot of levels because, and I'll tackle it a different way. So the question of downsizing really goes towards A, financial stability. B, your financial stability is really based on your happiness model, right? So what makes you happy and what are you comfortable with being stable? And when we look at the essence of happiness as, and I'm sure this is a profound journey for everyone, but I found the essence of happiness after looking after it years after years after years is this ability to be content. And I find when someone is happy with who they are, where they are, and aren't, free of judgment, free of where they want to be, then they can transition psychologically into this notion of content and this notion of managing their finances and getting financially stable. Because once you now address your happiness model, you now factor in your needs, your true needs and your true wants on a different level. So I think that is the key. And also bringing it in, when does someone get started? To circle back to the first point, all an investment is when your savings works for you. So I figured the minute you begin earning savings, your savings should begin working for you. So literally, and again, it's a cultural thing where we don't speak about retirement, again, being a society of savers, spenders and not living for today. But reality is, from you get your first paycheck, you should explore having an individual retirement account. And from when you have a good amount of money in the bank and you realize the bank by definition is a lending institution and is a tool that should be used to build stuff, then you can use it that way and you would kind of explore it. And I really, your first question slipped my mind, so I'm so sorry, but there were 3 questions.
Yes, can sand dollar accrue
Oh,
interest?
great question. So as a sand dollar, just like any other dollar, it only accrues interest when it is. So you have the ability to sweep sand dollar into your bank account. You will have the ability to sweep sand dollar into a mutual fund that earns interest, but the
Excuse me,
sand dollar
Leno,
itself
this
is just
Bradley.
yes, sir.
Sorry, can you repeat that, please? We just had a break in audio for a
Okay,
second. So if you could just start that answer again.
sure, not a problem. So sand dollar is just like sand dollar is a dollar amount, right? And it's a dollar value. And just like a real dollar, it can only earn interest when it's put into an interest-bearing account or an account designed to earn interest. The beautiful thing is with sand dollar, you will be able to sweep it into your bank account that earns interest. You'll be able to sweep it and pull it from your mutual funds that do earn interest. But just like that dollar that's sitting in your pocket right now, not earning interest, akin to that, it's that kind of weight. But once you've now put that sand dollar into something that does earn interest, then yes. So the goal of it is to look at it as it is literally digital money, and you would, it'll earn interest when you put it in an interest-bearing account, and you would have the ability to do that. So hopefully that answered the question
Yes.
correctly.
One last question, or might be 2
Sure.
questions.
Yeah,
How long
not a
has-
problem, sir.
How long has Sand Dollar been in existence? And how many businesses has bought into it thus far?
Oh, that's a great question. So this would have been, so sand dollar would have been introduced sometime last year in Exuma or Abaco. That's when they would have done the test pilot. Then, COVID happened. And so that kind of slowed down its deployment. There are some businesses that are accepting sand dollar again as they deploy to market. One or two businesses are, well, physical businesses are NRG. And then the good thing about Canoe is Canoe has the ability to load Sand Dollar, and every merchant in the Canoe network accepts Sand Dollar as well. So I think what's happening now is, again, because to speak to your earlier question, central bank is only the money supply. So central bank is depending on the payment service providers to create the infrastructure for people, merchants, and consumers to kind of to spend amongst each other. So literally, people are spending Sand Dollar. I mean, I have a friend who would have bought lunch at Balmoral Club with Sand Dollar. So there are places that are taking it now. But again, with technology, as you could appreciate, sir, you know, there's a certain hardware that goes with the software. So just like you need the mic and the speakers to make sure the audio connects with the laptop, there's a certain hardware that goes with, you know, point of. Our places taking Sand Dollar now. And the central bank is committed to pushing that mandate.
A question from the audience is, how do you buy it?
Also, great question. So you can download the central bank's app itself, the Sand Dollar. But then the only problem is that's a reference app, so you still will need a reference merchant to use it. But you can download an app like Canoe, and once you go through the process, you can load your wallet with Sand Dollar.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that there are about 4 or 5 platforms that are approved by the central bank providers. Any particular reason why you're only singling out Canoe?
Oh, well, that's the one I'm the most familiar with. And I know I'm more familiar with their marketplace. But if we were to list them out, there is, and again, with the payment service providers, there are different types within that classification. But there is, let me see, there is
Mobile Assist?
Mobile Assist is one, yes. Mobile
Cash and
Assist,
Go?
Cash and Go is another.
So I think, in all fairness, I mean, you should, if you're gonna say one particular person, you should give all 4 so that you can know that there are more than just one available on the market. Either that or just say use the platform.
100%, ma'am. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm just speaking with the one that I'm familiar with, and I apologize for that. I don't want it seem one-sided. I just wanted to speak from a perspective of knowledge. With that said, you feel free to dabble. The central bank has listed all of the payment service providers. I encourage everyone to check it out. They're doing an education campaign starting April 1st. And yeah, but there are Mobile Assist, Cash and Go, Omni, and different ones have different elements. Some are wallets, some are merchant marketplaces, some are peer-to-peer, some have bill pay. But I encourage everyone to look at starting from the central bank and taking direction from them, more or less.
Are there any other questions in virtual land? Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm here.
Is there a cost, Mr. Brathwaite, is there a cost to operate these digital wallets? If you get the Sand Dollar, is there a cost, as far as you're aware, to operate these digital wallets?
Yeah, so I know different wallet providers have this element of loading fees because where the wallets come in is they provide the infrastructure of connectivity. So I know different wallets have different loading fees. The central bank in its core, it has a reference app, which is again, their app, the Sand Dollar, but what they are mindful of is they don't want to be too far in the market because they are the money supply, more or less. but people can start there. But I'm pretty sure every provider provides information on their fees, but I think there is some loading fees, if I'm not mistaken. Now, what's interesting too is understanding the central bank's mandate, because the central bank has mandated there should be no fees for peer-to-peer transaction. So someone loading their wallet is totally different than the cost with them sending money in between each other. In addition, central bank has mandated that all the wallet providers have interoperability. And that mandate, if I'm not, let me check my notes. Sorry, y'all, bear with me. All right, targets. So according to the central bank, according to their critical timelines from the stakeholders meetings, regulations were reviewed between the 13th of February with public consultation. The 30th of April is the finalization. Interoperable wallets is the 31st of March. So the lady would have referenced, Mobile Assist, Canoe, Cash and Go, and Omni. So the central bank doesn't care who wallet you have. Their mandate is that all wallet providers should be interoperable. And again, that is a target date by March 31st. They have a target date of ACH integration of also of March 31st, and then they start their increased public education as of April 2021. So the fees to load wallets will be different between providers. Central bank's mandate is that every wallet should. Central bank also has a mandate of there'll be no fee from peer-to-peer transaction or payments in that regard. So I hope I was able to answer your question.
Thank you.
Not a problem, my pleasure.
I have a question here. Goal supposed to be what everyone should try to strive for. Goal replaces, not replaces, but gold is valuable more than paper money, sand dollar, or the new currency you said we would be moving toward. I want to know if you purchase the sand dollar, the COVID, the money, the B money, that you call it, the last currency you said. Yes. What's the difference with purchasing them as opposed to purchasing gold? If you have gold, aren't you in a better position than those other currencies you talked about a while ago?
Yeah, so when someone looks at gold, they are now looking at gold as a commodity. And so as a commodity, it is an investment. And as a commodity, it has a baseline value. And the funny, interesting thing about gold is intertwined within the history of money itself, because it was the first common store of exchange. A good way to look at it is gold is still a commodity, more so, and money has evolved into different forms, going from physical gold to paper to now digital, and digital representation, and now into digital currency. So all the things we were mentioned are just methods of payments, like a means to an end, whereas gold would be a commodity. So if you were looking at an investment, by all means, you can invest in gold per se, but you wouldn't invest in sand dollar, because sand dollar is just basically a payment commodity. Now, Bitcoin is acting like a commodity, but that's why it's different than what sand dollar represents. And I think that is the key. But everything we would have discussed with sand dollar is just a payment method. Bitcoin is a payment method that is acting like a commodity, and that's with its own separate conversation. And then lastly, gold is a commodity that you can invest in. So it's really your preference style. The thing about gold, though, is actually physically owning gold. That I kind of come across that question different ways. You've seen different ways to do it. But that would be the key distinction. gold is an actual commodity, sand dollar is actually a payment or a legal tender, just digitally, and Bitcoin is a payment, which is a proof of concept, but because it's held amongst its pairs, it has value and is now acting like a commodity. But I would say invest in whatever your comfort level is, and with any investment, you get information to use. But I would just use a mutual fund or as well as an Was I able to tackle your question successfully?
Good evening.
Good
Does the
evening.
central bank looking to replace paper money with the sand dollar? And I say that because we just came through like Hurricane Dorian, where all the power was gone for almost a week. Does it mean all business transactions stop, so you can't buy anything with this sand dollar? There's no electricity.
So that's a great question, right? So it was situations like Dorian which urged and sparked the need for sand dollar, because what they realized is that they needed payment options in railways that could exist above the traditional infrastructure. So when things go down, things can now go up. And the reason why the central bank is integrating all of these things together is they're focusing on the money supply, and then they're managing the payments of service providers who now are existing as an app on people's phone. And so when people get an interruption of that magnitude, the goal is that as long as you have power to your phone and you have an app and you have access to sand dollar, then it would allow you to mobilize a lot quicker. So the central bank goal is to have this solution that can kind of problem solve these things that can really interrupt us, and one of the first things they kind of had up and running was the mobile network and whatnot. And so sand dollar, along with the digital infrastructure that's needed, which can exist in an app on someone's phone or within a point of sale system, would allow people to now have access to their funds. And again, that's their goal. And this is no different as a solution than other global solutions that would have come before fractured infrastructure. So for example, if anyone's familiar with Africa and the M-Pesa was like literally mobile money that was sent because there was broken infrastructure, but it still allowed people to connect and make payments. And again, that connected the whole thing. So the central bank is to have sand dollar as a solution to jumpstart any interruption to any economy, but to really keep people connected and have the money floating at a different level. So it wouldn't be trapped at the usual trappings of that infrastructure.
I see another question from Virtual Land. Will a sand dollar be available for use in other countries?
So it's interesting, right? So the sand dollar is equivalent to B dollar. And with it being B dollar, even though we're pegged to US dollar, we're still subject to exchange control and exchange control policies. So with that said, theoretically, the technology is ahead of the curve, but the exchange jurisdictions that exist with the different countries have to be respected and mindful. So I think what we will see sand dollar evolve to is once it has this ability to affect, impact settlement and all of that in the local level, and that trickles over to the financial services level, I think it'll exist in the remittance level, but it won't be like someone is sending sand dollar to out of the country. Dollar sand dollar to send that money into whatever currency is accepted in the jurisdiction that they're sending. So again, we're dealing with the legalities of jurisdiction and foreign exchange versus the technology. Sand dollar can send it to anyone who's in its ecosystem. But again, the invisible lines will pop up in that regard.
Thank you.
Not a
Okay.
problem, sir.
Any more questions from our live audience or from virtual land? I think that's it. So I think this comes to an end of our financial symposium. So I'm just moving to the vote of thanks. Mr. Brathwaite, Mr. Jones, I'd like to thank you so very much on behalf of the rector, the deacon, ordinand, and the vestry members of Christ King Anglican Church. I'd also like to ask you to extend our thanks to Mr. Sean Longley, the head of Leno Corporate Services. Sean is well, some people may know that Sean used to serve around the altar here at Christ the King, and he was my throughful when I was a boat, way back when. So we have a their place in our hearts for Sean and his family. Longley family being a very prominent family in our parish. We'd like to thank you, Mr. Brathwaite, for giving us your time. Mr. Jones as well for giving us your time and expertise and giving us this wealth of knowledge when it comes to finance, digital currency, Bitcoins, the sand dollar, and all other forms of method of payment that we can go about now, and equities, bonds, and mutual funds. Now, if Christ the King, you're in virtual land, we can't give you a token of our appreciation. So we're gonna see if we could send you some Bitcoin and you'll get that inside your wallet shortly. Okay?
Well played, sir. Well played. Well played. Well played.
We have a wallet.
Well played. Well, I am just honored to share any information and knowledge is power. I think, it's important to have a global conversation. And I think it's important to understand that, we have to be our brother's keeper, and I'm happy just to do my part. And I'm happy to share any information, and, we welcome this new age, the goal is to make everyone's life a little bit easier, and that's what central bank is trying to do. And I kind of recognize and award them for being so proactive, because we are doing big things in this little land. But yeah, not a problem, sir. This is my my honor and privilege to have done this tonight.
Okay, we have comments coming in from virtual land that it was a great presentation. We'd like to hail Mr. Warren Roll. We see also Mr. Brenda Moore is also with us. We see that Ms. Monroe and Ms. Major also indicated this was a wonderful presentation. Now, if you missed any part of the presentation, we will post this onto our YouTube page, so everyone would be able to see this presentation at a later time. Once again, we thank you so very much, and we thank those in the audience here tonight. And we ask our rec to finish us off with a word of prayer and probably a blessing for which we'll be asked.
Just bow our heads. Thank you, Lord, for this experience of enlightenment. We now ask you to nourish us in body, mind, and spirit. We pray for temporal food we're about to receive, the hands that prepared it, and the mouth that will digest the food that we receive tonight. The food, oh God, that's of knowledge and understanding. And the food, oh God, that is able to nourish our bodies, that it may be in a way that fortifies our spirit, go forth to serve you. And now, Lord, as the shades lengthen, as the busy world is touched and the theme of life is over, and our work is done, grant us a safe lodging, a holy rest, and peace at the last. We may rise again to give you the honor, give you the glory, so that we may be more fortified with knowledge and understanding to build up your kingdom here on earth, now and evermore. Amen. Yes, O Lord, it's food for our use and ourselves your service. In Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Good evening, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Fat Tuesday, your Shrove Tuesday.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Wonderful
There's
presentation.
church at 5:45 in the morning, the director tells me, and I have to say that. It's 5:30, 5:45 tomorrow morning, 12 noon or 6 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you so very much.
Thank you all. Y'all have a blessed and wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.